Hi, welcome to your first Edpuzzle. You'll be taking guided notes as I go over the information. So today's first lesson is going to be on forces and motion. So we're going to talk about the definition of force. Your definition of force is a push or pull on an object. So I want you guys to think of if you were playing tug of war, that'd be an example of exerting force. One person would be pulling and the other team would be pulling, and those are both examples of force. Another example is if you were pushing on a door to open it. So pushing and pulling. This picture is a great example. Push and pull. That is your force. The next thing I'm going to go into is gravity. Gravity is the force of attraction between objects. So all objects have some sort of force of attraction. There's two things that are going to dictate how much strength will depend upon the gravity. So gravity is going to depend on two things. Those two things, first one is going to be mass. Mass is how much stuff is in an object. So if we were looking at an object, it's filled with structural atoms. How much stuff is inside of that structure? And that would tell you the mass. Okay, so that's your mass. So this will dictate. So the more mass something is, the more gravity it would have. Okay? The next thing would be distance. Is that your way? The amount of space between objects. So the closer an object is, the more gravity it's going to apply. The further something is, the least amount of gravity it's going to give. So mass, the two things that is going to dictate gravity is mass and distance. And that's going to tell you how much strength that gravity is going to have. Okay, so just a little bit more information on gravity and mass. So the greater the mass of an object, the stronger the gravity between them. So here's an example. So the person that is on Earth and a person that is on the moon, the person when you are on Earth, you're going to have more gravity than if you're on the moon. Why? Because the Earth has more mass. Even though your mass is the same, Earth's mass is greater than the moon's. So because one of the objects, so between the two objects, one object is larger, it has a greater mass, it's going to have more gravity. So more gravity on the larger object versus the smaller object. Just so you know, the mass is usually measured in kilograms. So you can kind of see mass equals 120 kilograms. And the gravity measurement will be in newtons. So as you can see, the mass, right? So your mass may be the same, but the weight in newtons is more on Earth. Again, why? Because Earth is larger between the two objects. So between two objects, you have some sort of gravitational pull. The person that's on Earth will have more of a gravitational weight, right? 1,200 newtons, versus on the moon only has 200 newtons, even though their mass is the same. So both their mass is 120 and 120, but again, on Earth, has a greater gravitational weight, 1,200, because why? Because your Earth is larger. All right, so now we're going to talk about gravity and distance. So before we talked about gravity and mass, mass has a large influence on gravity. Also, so does distance. So on top of mass, you also have the distance. So in this instance here, there's going to be certain times when the sun and the moon are completely lined up. And when this occurs, that's when you might see that full moon. And it's going to have a greater influence, the moon will, on the tides. Why? Because it's closer. Okay, so any object that is closer, the combined gravitational pull of the sun and the moon, so the fact that there's actual added mass because the two are added together, and also the moon is closer between the two. When that occurs, it's going to dictate your tide. So distance also will play a role. The closer you are to a object, especially when you're talking about planets, especially when you talk about planets, the more gravity that it's going to have. Okay, so the next thing we're talking about is speed. The distance traveled by an object in a given amount of time. So speed has two variables. The two are going to be distance and time. So how far you're going and how much time it takes you to get there. So here's your equation. Speed equals distance over time. I have given you this triangle. I'll go over more on tomorrow because we're going to be practicing this equation. But you have speed equals d over t. So S stands for speed. So S equals speed. D is the short of distance, and t is short of time. So basically the first letter is what determines that. Okay, so speed equals distance over time. So speed will be some sort of distance over time. Distance would be like in meters, and vice versa. Okay, all right, that's all. Thank you.